Hey everybody, this is Miss Lynch here. This is my third time trying to start this video, so hopefully it'll work this time. This is chapter 20, part 1's lecture. So let me just make a quick note to myself before I forget something. Okay, sorry. Okay, yes, this is chapter 20, part 1. And the title of our chapter is From Business Culture to Great Depression, the 1920s, 1920 to 1932. Okay? So you should have everything up and going and be ready to go. Okay, and I am ready as well. So here we go. Our chapter starts, like I just said, 1920, and we are picking up from chapter 19, where World War I had ended and Europe is in shambles. The United States is also involved in that, so it's a turbulent time and a lot of animosity towards different groups of people, which, big surprise there. But we kind of are picking up from the Red Scare, which is conversations about the Red Scare have been in the news this week. I don't know if you guys have heard that. I won't get into it too much because it's current and political, but powers that be made a statement about historians only teaching the negative side of U.S. history, and we're not focusing on positive aspects of it, and saying that those of us that are including different perspectives are doing so in the communist vein of history. So I just wanted to say that talking about people of color and issues involving gender is not a communist threat, okay? It's just talking about historical facts. So to quote Bruce Fisher, who is Ada Lois Buell Fisher's son, which you should look her up if you're not familiar. She's very incredible. I think I've talked about her a little bit in here. But to quote her son, there's only one history, period. Okay, so those are the facts. That's whenever we're talking about different voices now and including those, it's not changing anything. It's just including more facts to the story that we've been told in the past. So just wanted to mention that for a sec because, yeah, that's current, that's happening right now. And also considering historians to be this, Marxist threat goes back to the Red Scare. So it's exactly what we're talking about in our material, and it's happening in the real world right now. So, so kind of keeping the Red Scare in mind, you guys can look into what is going on in the news. I will leave that up to you. You can decide what is fact and what is fiction, but I'm just here to tell you the facts. That's all. That's my job, all right? I will get off my soapbox and move right along. Okay, anywho, but so this chapter starts, and the reason I'm saying all of this about the Red Scare is because your opening vignette in this chapter talks about the case of Sacco and Vanzetti, okay? So let us look at our slideshow. Our first picture here, and this also, I've had this picture up for a while as our cover photo, but again, talking about being responsible in discussing our national history and being responsible and inclusive, and yeah, that's all. Okay, so this is a group of new women, as you can see, which we'll get to that section here in a little bit, discussing women's role kind of changing during the 1920s. So you can see these women have short hair, their ankles are showing. These are new women of the 20th century. But so that's why I chose this cover photo. Okay, and then our next image is that of Sacco and Vanzetti. So our first page, like I said in the chapter, is about them. And these were two Italian immigrant workers who were accused of being involved in a bank robbery in 1920, which you can look into this. The facts still are not super solid that they were ever involved. But they had socialist roots, so this fed into the Red Scare of immigrant workers coming over to America and bringing communism with them and taking our jobs and all of this stuff. So this becomes kind of this national case, and it goes on for a year, 1920 to 1921, and these two men are executed. They're accused of this bank robbery, executed, and Sacco and Vanzetti, become martyrs. They become symbols of, thinking back to our workers' movement during the Progressive era and all of that. They are these working class men that represent so much that was wrong with the system at that time, okay? Woody Guthrie wrote a song about them, which I do believe I left on the syllabus as an extra credit listening activity. But if you listen to that song, the song is literally like, here's Sacco's life, here's Vanzetti's life, here's what these two men did, and they died because of this. But so it's a folk song. So it's called Two Good Men. I think the full title's Two Good Men, A Long Time Gone. But so that should be on your syllabus still. Okay, so Sacco and Vanzetti become martyrs, like I said. So this is 1921. Okay, now then let's talk about what's going on in the American economy. All right. Okay, so the business of America was business, okay, capitalism. Going back in a couple of chapters, whenever we talked about, was this last chapter? I can't remember, but Henry Ford and the rise of Fordism and the factory system, okay? This is just growing over time. And really the Victorians, that era, locked down industrialization. So by the time we get to the 1920s, capitalism and industrialization is, the way things are, and this generation just quote unquote perfects the system, all right? But so in saying that, the 1920s is really whenever, well, even going back further, but this is really whenever the United States goes from a producing culture to a consuming culture, and that's because of all of the goods that start coming out related to like technology, which we'll talk about and all of that. But really, the consumer market kind of explodes, okay? Like I said, this goes back to Henry Ford. So the automobile was our background of economic growth. Different companies start coming out during this time. Production triples across the board. So this stimulated steel, rubber, oil production, road construction, and then all of these other sectors of the economy that are related to all of those things. So whenever you create a new technology, it then forms its own series of problems that then need new technologies and so and so on and so on. So this just, stimulates all of these other economies coming out of these basic things. All right. And we'll talk about this more here in a little bit, but many people resented this commercial culture, because most people still don't have a lot of excess cash to spend on these goods. And so whenever you're being told that the only way you can be a good, productive American is if you can, get this vacuum cleaner, get this refrigerator, and those are out of your means, it makes you feel like you are not doing what you should be doing. So it creates a lot of resentment between average people, all right? Okay, a new society. All right, consumer goods, this is really just going off what I was just saying, but so consumer goods of all kinds promoted a way of satisfying Americans' psychological desires and everyday needs. So again, think of refrigerators, think of vacuum cleaners, toasters. But so these are just kind of things in the 1920s. Running water, electricity, all right, just basic things that we consider basic necessities now. All right, Americans also during this time began spending more of their income on leisure activities, which we hit on last chapter. This new generation spending their money going to the theater and going to amusement parks and stuff like that. Vacations kind of become a staple, it's assumed, not so much in this generation, but by this generation's kids. So in the 50s, everybody goes on a family vacation every year. That kind of becomes a norm. All right, so vacations, going to the movies. Movies are a new thing. We talked about how it was cheaper to get a film and show it than to hire a cast of people to put on a play. So, movies become, our mass entertainment. And then also sporting events, which is still true today. So yeah, these are things that we still do today. I mean, when we could go do things, but you know what I mean. Okay, radios, phonographs. This is bringing all this entertainment into the American home. With radios, you'll start to have soap operas, like, oh my gosh. I can't even think of what just like radio programming, fictionalized, teleplays, like, what are those called? Anyway, you guys know what I'm talking about. These are the things that will become our soap operas and television shows, but so just like radio broadcasts. Okay, anywho. Okay, radios, phonograph players. Then this gets into a lot of the stuff that is entering the American home that is related to household technology. So telephones, vacuum cleaners, like I said, washing machines, refrigerators, and all of this technology, which I think I told you guys about the book that I'm reading, More Work for Mother, and it's just about how technology has shifted the way housework is done, but it has never really resolved time issues and time constraints. So, and this is evident here. But yeah, all of these technologies come about and then eliminates the need for domestic labor, which had been a field for, a lot of working class people. But then this is called the proletarianization of housework. So then housewives are expected to do their own work because they have all of these resources. So, and also at that point in time, it was believed that because women had all of these amenities, that they should be able to, take care of their house and family and do so lovingly and happily and willingly. Anyway, that book is very, very interesting and goes through, just all of these different shifts. But so all of these advancements are supposed to help make things easier in the house, but it then just increases workloads. So it doesn't help give anybody any extra free time when it comes down to it. Okay, anywho, moving off of household technology before I go down a rabbit hole. But okay, also, and going back to what I was saying, that a lot of people were really resentful towards this economy because it was stuff that was outside of their means. But Americans began accepting the idea of going into debt to get all of these new technological devices. And so people, and this goes back to our farmers wanting to get the newest farm technology, but people start taking out loans. People start buying things on credit, doing things in installments, okay? And then sometimes you can't pay those bills, and this creates this system of debt, all right? So this is kind of the first time we're seeing this on this broad scale of people putting themselves in debt just to get, the brightest, shiniest new thing that then in itself creates its own problems, that needs new technology, that then creates new problems, that needs new technology. It's just a vicious cycle is what it comes down to. But anyway, alrighty. So that is society on a whole, as a whole, I should say. Like I said, that the credit system goes back to our farmers from, the 1890s on. But so let's look at them for a moment. All right. So fruits of increased production were very unequally distributed. Like I said, this just goes back to any section we've talked about, and any section I probably will talk about, but there's always going to be class divisions and an imbalance of wealth. All right? So this is seen with our farmers. Like I said, a lot of them had been on credit for a long time to get the newest farming equipment, and then maybe they couldn't repay their loans, they get further in debt, and so on and so on. But so by 1929, it was estimated that 40% of, is this a general population? Farming population. I think it's general population, yes. Still lived below the poverty line, all right? And so the way the 20s are always depicted, it's this time of prosperity. You're seeing flappers, everyone is out drinking champagne and blah, 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 But there is a lot, like I said, 40% below the poverty line. There is a lot of impoverished people in the country. So our farmers are very representative of that. And during the 1920s, which this will bleed over into the 1930s for sure, but California begins seeing a lot of displaced farmers from across the country coming in because of lack of work, because of drought situations, all right? So keep that in mind whenever we get to Oklahoma in the 30s, because we will talk about the Dust Bowl and Oklahoma farmers being a part of that. But this starts in the 20s. So the idea of the Okie being the first farmers to go to California, that's not true. This had been going on for 10 years. That's why they thought to do it, because it was kind of this pattern, okay? And 10 years, I mean, a generation or two before that. But so California begins seeing this influx of farmers coming in. Yeah, and then a lot of that has to do with mechanization. So like I said, all of that farming equipment that's being developed during this time and pushed on these farmers. It's the mechanization of farming and them being told that this is the way it has to be done now. This is the new way. Okay. So there is, increased production because of the stuff that they have, all of these tools. And then out of the war, there's a stagnation. So again, it's this bubble, and farmers are not, they're not receiving a livable income. They can't pay stuff back. And so many farms are being foreclosed upon, and that's why, that's part of the push to go to California, okay? All right, so let's switch over to women's freedom. Like I said, our ladies on our cover photo represent the new women of the 20s. Okay, so female liberation resurfaced as a lifestyle. The generation before this, it was, for more educational opportunities, women being able to work more. So that's our 1890s. So this would be like their daughters, all right? So female liberation begins to resurface. This time it's more of just an overall lifestyle, not just in the workplace. And it becomes the stuff of advertising and mass entertainment. Like I said, whenever you think of the 20s, you think of like that flapper image. That's what this means, okay? The flapper had, like we can see with our group of women on the cover photo, they have short hair, they have short skirts, they're showing their ankles. They were smoking and drinking in public. They were learning to drive automobiles, and they were practicing forms of birth control, all right? So they were not, so this creates this generation of women that are getting married and having children later on, and kind of working and, living their lives for themselves a little bit at a younger age. Clara Bow is considered to be the first flapper, but, it's been revealed that even she was really inspired by Josephine Baker. And let me see. Yeah, we'll get into this in the second half of this chapter, but with the Harlem Renaissance, that is really where that image, it comes out of the jazz movement coming out of Harlem, and then it is popularized, and it becomes, like I said, the stuff of advertising and mass entertainment. So that flapper image will become, it represents this whole decade. So we'll get into that more about the roots of it, but Clara Bow is considered to be the first flapper. This is not true. She was inspired by others, okay? All right, like I said, these new women are out showing off their legs, smoking, drinking, and sex really becomes this marketing tool of representing the new women, okay? Like I said, this was all supposed to be during their younger years. They were still expected to get married, have children, run homes. So I guess this was supposed to be their period of sowing their wild oats. Okay. Okie dokie. So, business and government. All right, so government policies of the 1920s reflected pro-business attitudes. Not surprising. Yeah, so this is an era that is anti-union. You know, unions are run by workers who are most likely immigrants, and we don't want that in America. So there's a lot of anti-unionism during this time. Yeah, and in going with the pro-business attitude, like I said, there's a lowering of taxes kind of across the board in many different avenues, and this will end poorly in 1929. But so this is just what's going on at that moment, all right? We had talked about Harding being elected. So the Harding administration quickly became known as one of the most corrupt in American history. And this saw the first felony conviction of a cabinet member. So, like I said, that pro-business, anti-union, lowering of taxes, political corruption, this kind of marks this point in time, okay? Calvin Coolidge was elected in 1924. Okay, so let's talk about the birth of civil liberties, and then that will kind of be my last talking point for this lecture. Alrighty. Coming out of the war, there is a depression that goes on for the first part of the 20s. Okay, so that's happening. Also, at the same time, the Postal Service begins censoring book mailings, and this was part of what was known as the Hays Code. And it was intended to prohibit any nudity or any sexual activity, so, long kisses or adultery in film. And a lot of artists go to Paris during this time. So these are known as, this is the Lost Generation. So Ernest Hemingway is considered to be one of these artists. Dalton Trumbo, wait, is Dalton Trumbo part of the Lost Generation? Yeah, he is. Sorry. So yeah, this generation of artists, they, experienced the war. A lot of them fought in it. It was considered, pretty much immediately, everyone realized how unnecessary of a conflict it had been. And while trying to kind of cope with that, they're then being censored federally. So a lot of artists, they leave and they go to France, right? In addition to that, the ACLU is formed in 1920. This seems like a lot of different things, but these are all social occurrences that are happening at the beginning of the 1920s is the theme. Okay, but so the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union, is formed. It's formed by the Civil Liberties Bureau, which had been created in 1917 as a reaction to the Espionage and Sedition Acts. It's part of, our whole Red Scare conversation. And the ACLU encouraged the freedom of speech, and they invented the right to privacy. Okay. Or they didn't invent it, but it was became a national conversation. Okay. Alrighty, and so this is the actual last thing I'm going to talk about. Where are we? Okay, so the Scopes trial. This is in 1925 in Tennessee. John Scopes is arrested for trying to teach evolution in school. Sorry, I just wanted to catch up. There we go. Okay. It's part of our culture wars. Okay. So he is arrested for trying to teach evolution in school. And the trial reflected this tension between two definitions of American freedom. This could be applied today also. Anyway, okay. But Scopes supported the ACLU and promoted the right to independent thought and individual self-expression. Excuse me. And the jury ended up finding Scopes guilty, but the Tennessee Supreme Court overturned this decision. And as a result of that, after the trial, fundamentalists ended up retreating for many years because of battles over public education, and as a result of that, ended up building a lot of private schools and colleges, which are still in existence today. But yeah, so the conversation of civil liberties is something that comes about in the 1920s, kind of on this larger scale. And that is where I will end, because then there's a mosquito right over here. Ew. Because the second half of our chapter will then take us to the response to discussions about civil liberties, okay? So, changing tones from here, so this is a good stopping point for me. If you guys have any questions about anything, please feel free to email me, and otherwise I will see you for the other half of the chapter. Okay, toodaloo, bye.